Welcome to the Nexus Unloaded podcast. This is Will Crozier.
And I'm Nikki Westcombe. We are the founders of Nexus Performance. Joining us on this wild ride is our heavyweight coaching team, ready to unleash their expertise to solve any problems in your journey to getting strong and jacked.
Through our real-world experience, we hope to break things down in a digestible, applicable, and entertaining way.
So pump up the volume and let's get into this.
Welcome back to the Nexus Unloaded podcast. We are very excited to have a special guest with us today, Mr. Luke Tulloch, who has now relocated to the other side of the world rather than being here in Australia. But obviously is someone that I've looked up to for many, many years in my own nutrition education and stuff like that, and have got a lot of wise words. And I've been listening to your podcast, and which I know you don't do a whole lot of anymore, but I used to love listening to it because it was very easy, digestible sort of information, and also obviously what you put out on social media and stuff as well. So I thought lately we've been having quite a few conversations around body recomposition and stuff with some clients, people going through preps or in the middle of preps and stuff like that. And I thought you were the perfect person to be able to bring on to really tie in the physiology and this and like, you know, that side of things, to have people actually understand what it means, as opposed to, you know, just sort of sitting here and talking about different protocols and stuff like that, just between the two of us. So yeah, I thought no one better to bring on than yourself and discuss this sort of stuff. So thank you for being here with us. Obviously the time zones are very different for both of us.
Yeah, thank you for accommodating me.
Yeah, that's all right. We want to make it work for you. You're a busy man too. But yeah, obviously, Luke, I don't want to pigeonhole you or put you in a box or anything like that. So I don't know if there's anything more specific you kind of want to go on to introduce yourself to some of our listeners who maybe don't know who you are?
Yeah, well, I mean, like you said, I was a trainer in Australia, and I think this is, what's the year, 25.
Yep.
So this will be my 17th year as a coach, and I did like neuroscience and stuff at university. So I've always been a bit interested in like mechanisms and physiology and stuff like that. So I think that's kind of the angle that I sort of took into my coaching.
Yeah.
But obviously also realized it's got to be super practical and understandable for people at the end of the day. So that's kind of where I come in. And so like a lot of my clients are, you know, your sort of intermediate lifter looking to put on muscle and get stronger. That's the main thing. So try and channel that stuff into some practical things they can use in their training and nutrition.
Yeah, definitely.
Perfect.
Yeah, I think like that's the biggest thing. I say this to a lot of my clients, that if they don't understand something, it's a lot harder for them to actually want to apply it.
Yeah, for
like
sure.
Like you don't have to know. Like, I mean, I don't even know the depths of things that you do. I know enough to be able to educate and you know, motivate people to the right directions and stuff like that. But, you know, for them, they don't even need to know the layers of nutrition and stuff that I know, for them to at least be able to apply themselves to it and put it into practice. But definitely the more people understand these things, the more likely they are to actually follow through with it and do it.
Yeah,
so
definitely. I mean, I think the buy-in's actually really underrated. And like when it comes to, you know, like mechanisms and research and all that kind of stuff, really what you're trying to do on our end is to kind of take that and be like, well, we're not just going to copy whatever protocol they use, but we're going to try and make sure that it's understandable, usable, and has buy-in for the person in front of us. So
yeah, definitely.
I mean,
and suits their individual needs as well. Like, you know, the papers are obviously there, but it's making it suit their lifestyle.
Clients aren't in a lab.
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. Exactly. Yeah. 100%.
Cool. So like I said, today what we wanted to kind of go over was recomping, and setting some expectations and some realities and stuff like that around that. So I think we should probably just sort of kick this off by pointing out like what recomping actually is. And if you want to sort of explain the physiology behind it.
For sure. Yeah, 100%. So a recomp is where you're sort of trying to improve your body composition from both ends. You're trying to lose a bit of fat, you're trying to gain a bit of muscle at the same time. And generally these are sort of competing notions in the body because we, broadly speaking, we can kind of categorize all the physiological processes that happen in your body into catabolic processes, breaks down stuff, and anabolic processes that builds up stuff. And when you look at each sort of individual pathway that, builds up muscle proteins or breaks down fat cells and burns fat and that kind of stuff, those things are generally butting heads. So if you want to build stuff up, you generally have to try and put your body into an anabolic state, and then you're anabolic, or you have to be in overall more of a catabolic state. And so it's kind of an oxymoron in some ways to say, okay, we want to recomp, we want to do two things at once. But it's definitely possible because, when we're trying to lose fat, really what we're trying to do is we're trying to liberate stored energy from fat cells. And when we're trying to build muscle, we're kind of trying to take energy and, amino acids and other stuff and build them up into muscles. So if you think about it, it kind of makes sense that, okay, well, I could take this energy from my fat cells and I could just use that energy to fund my muscle building. So it does kind of make sense from a theoretical point of view, but I guess putting it into practice can be a little bit more challenging because you're sort of trying to do two things at once that they're not quite compatible in the same way. So that's broadly speaking what recomping is. And there are different situations where it might be easier or it might be harder depending on the particular circumstances of the person. So I guess we're going to get a little bit more into that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And like one of the things when Will and I were having this conversation is that like your body is always breaking things down and building things at the same time. It's never in a state of like complete anabolism and complete a complete catabolic state. Like you're always building something and it's always breaking down stuff at the same time. So that's where obviously if we talk about like being in an energy surplus, you're putting yourself into a more of a anabolic state to minimize the amount of breakdown and stuff like that that's happening with proteins and that sort of stuff. So
exactly right. Yeah.
That kind of leads us into the first question that we have here, which is, can you grow muscle without being in a surplus, and how that process kind of works?
Yeah, you can. So again, there's a few different things that we need for muscle to grow. And some of that is just like you need a stimulus. You need a reason for the muscle to grow, and that's why we train, right? So that's telling our body, okay, switch on muscle protein synthesis. But then we have the sort of nutritive factors as well. So we need something to make the muscle out of, which is amino acids. And you can think of these as kind of little Lego pieces that build up the different proteins, the different structures. Exactly. And then we need enough energy to fund all of that. Now, when we say we need enough energy, it can kind of come from anywhere. We can break down other protein structures in our body to build up other ones. So as an example, let's say you never trained a particular muscle group and you trained other muscle groups really hard. Your body's kind of going, well, we're not using our calves. So
I was literally going to say calves.
We had a conversation about that today.
There's actually a recent study that was like literally like muscle gets reallocated. So like if you're not training a muscle, but you're training other ones hard and your body kind of needs the resources to stick into the other ones, it'll just let some of them shrink and it'll take those amino acids from there and they'll stick it somewhere else.
Yeah.
So, that can happen. We can get it obviously from food and stuff, and then the energy itself, can come from our body fat stores. It can come from within us, or obviously we obviously get some of it from eating as well. So in a surplus, what we're really trying to do is to just say we're providing kind of more energy than is necessarily required, just to make sure that we are completely saturating all of those areas. We're training hard, so we're providing good stimulus. We're getting in heaps of protein, so we've got tons of amino acids around to build muscle out of. And then we've got heaps of energy around to fund all of those processes. And once we've built up that muscle, we've got enough energy to make sure that it hangs around, to make sure that, we're training harder, we've got enough energy to fuel that, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of key, where that surplus energy comes from. But we can take it from fat stores. And so the challenge is kind of like, how do we preferentially get the energy from those fat stores to go to muscle? And I suppose that's where you have to be a little bit more specific with recomping when you're talking about, nailing some of the basic stuff, like getting in enough protein, training correctly, recovering correctly, managing stress, maybe meal timing gets a bit more important.
Yeah.
All of these things kind of have to be a bit more particular because you're kind of trying to do something that your body doesn't normally do. In some cases, if you have a lot of body fat, then it's much easier. So as an example, we can see that people who are obese, or let's say they're beginners, or a combination of the two, they tend to recomp pretty easily because they got plenty of extra fat stores. Their brain's not trying to protect those fat stores. And so it's happy to kind of allocate that to building more muscle. But you can imagine if you're already relatively lean, you're already relatively advanced, you've already got quite a lot of muscle mass, from a sort of survival mechanism point of view, your brain's not really looking to add a ton more lean mass that might threaten your survival.
Yeah.
It's kind of doing a little bit of maths on how much energy availability you have. And when we talk about energy availability, there's a few things going on, because your brain has sort of a mechanism to track your sort of short-term energy availability. So how much energy is coming in, how much energy is going out. It has mechanisms that kind of track longer-term stuff as well. What are my energy stores like in the longer term? And so if it's kind of going, well, we aren't eating in a surplus, so our energy in and energy out is like reasonably balanced. We're happy with that, but we don't really have any extra to spare on new projects, so to say. And our long-term energy stores are fine. Like, we have some body fat, but it's not like we have a huge excess. It's not exactly going to go, well, let's build a new highway. Like, the budget's not really there for it. You know what I mean? So on the other hand, if we have tons of energy availability, maybe it's going, yeah, sweet. Let's splurge a little bit. Let's build a bit of muscle with it. Doesn't matter. So the answer to the question is, yes, you can build muscle without a surplus, but it kind of depends on your individual circumstances. If you don't have a lot of extra energy availability, going to be much harder. And if you're not really nailing some of the details around your training and recovery and nutrition, that kind of stuff, it's also going to be a little bit harder. Yeah,
definitely. I think like in that context, obviously that's where we can start to get into like
subcategories of like who might benefit the most out of body recomp. Like, do you have like a spectrum of where you see people kind of fit that works best?
Oh, for sure. Look, I think, it is a mix of sort of what's practical and the sort of long-term vision of the trainee. Certainly when someone's a beginner and or let's say they're a bit overweight, like, I don't specifically try and get a cut or a bulk happening necessarily. I kind of go, look, let's get some good nutrition habits. Let's get some good training habits and get you training hard. And it's probably going to happen by itself. We probably don't really need to do too much. So in those cases, I kind of don't worry about it too much. But as someone gets a little bit more advanced, I start to think about what's going to be realistic for them and their ultimate goal. If someone's really focused on mostly just kind of like, you get some people like myself who I'm not necessarily like, I would like to have more muscle, but I'm not like, I need to be as muscular as possible within the next year.
It's nice to have.
It's nice to have, yeah. And, I go in and I train hard and I enjoy my training and stuff and I want to see progress on it. Like, that case is, I think, quite a good case for a recomp, because you're not looking for, I need to be, have an extra kilo of muscle by a specific date or anything like that. I'm more involved in the process and the lifestyle that I have with my training and nutrition. And I know that, like, very slowly but surely, my body composition is going to change and improve over that time.
Yeah.
But
There's
if you
no
have
rush,
other situations,
there's no timeline or anything like
there's
that.
no rush. And like, if I put another kilo on of muscle, like, my next goal is, okay, well, the next kilo, I guess, you know what I mean? Like, it just, I'm going to be lifting for the next like 50 years. So it's fine. And so, but if you have someone who's like really trying to make a lot of progress, then I think you got to be a little bit more tactical about it. And so, in the context of like powerlifting, if we're in a particular weight class, then maybe it's a case of taking it a bit slower, because you might be quite close to the ceiling of your weight class, as an example. And if you don't want to jump up to the next one, well, a recomp's probably a good way to go, because you're not going to necessarily want to do a big bulk and then cut back again necessarily. But if you're also someone who's just like, I just want to get as strong as possible regardless of weight class, then, the recomp approach might not be the best approach. It might just be like, hey, let's just go bulk and cut kind of idea, just so I can absolutely maximize muscle mass in a short amount of time to maximize my strength or something like that. So I think there are kind of categories, but certainly, like, if we think about a continuum, and on one end is a beginner, on the other end's like highly advanced, like Will Crozier or something, we're going, that gets harder as you go along the spectrum. And so I think what it really comes down to is, like, what are your goals with your training, and are you looking for just repeat your lifestyle? Because then a recomp's probably fine. Or if you have a specific outcome for like growing a lot of muscle, then I would say, or losing a lot of fat, then I would say, look, let's probably maybe aim for a little bit more bulking and cutting, and maybe recomp is kind of your maintenance in between.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I know that's the world that you love to live in yourself, or encourage
I
a lot
love
more
that.
of your athletes to go through, is just understanding that maintenance is not just
Stagnant.
Yeah, like it's not like, oh, I'm in a maintenance of calories here. I'm not putting any muscle mass on. I'm not losing any. I'm just staying the same. I look the same. And it's like, well, that's not the intent of a maintenance. A maintenance is to give your body time to recognize this new homeostasis. If there has been a force of surplus or a drop in body fat, and then, recognizing that you can absolutely have body composition changes whilst in that maintenance sort of position. I know that's something that you've like to encourage a lot of people to do as well.
I think it's a skill. I think it's not easy to be at maintenance, and I guess do all those 1%ers to kind of maximize your potential to recomp in that phase, because I feel like there's a lot of things that you could do. But before we go into that, I'd also love to get your, I guess, idea on, like, when you say like beginner or intermediate lifter, like what does that look like to you, if we had to kind of explain it?
Yeah. I mean, look, it's a bit
hard.
of a vibe sometimes, isn't it? But certainly, like, I mean, look, someone's first like 6 to 12 months of lifting or something, it's like, honestly, kind of just lift regularly and like eat reasonably, and you'll recomp. Like, you're going to build muscle and lose fat at the same time. It's going to happen. There's probably not most people listening to this. So once you get out of that sort of initial stage, you're more intermediate. And like, I think just distinguishing it from like beginner, intermediate, advanced is a little bit tough, because, an early intermediate or a late intermediate, it's probably a bit different.
People also like to think that they're a lot higher graded than where they are, because I've worked really hard for the last 6 months. It's like, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're an intermediate now because you've had my 100%. Dog Bowser is just being an absolute menace right now.
He's loving it.
He's like, I want to be in the film too.
He knows I ate mincemeat for dinner. He's all over me.
So Bowser's such a menace.
Oh, for sure. But I mean, look, I think you probably know, if you're more advanced, if you've been lifting like quite a long time, like I think that like the gains start to come slower and slower, right? And you have to work harder for them. So I think by that stage, you probably know, like, hey, it's not that easy for me to gain muscle. Even if I do, sort of a bulk or a cut, and I'm like really trying to maximize that, it still takes a while for me to make significant gains.
Absolutely.
Which we all get to that point at some point. Then, that recomp is still viable. It's just going to be a lot slower.
Yeah, definitely. And that's one of the things, like, for the listeners, it's like, I've got some athletes on my roster at the moment that are incredibly strong, but they're actually only quite new to lifting. They've just got a lot of that genetic, like that potential. Their ceiling of strength is already like a lot higher than the average person that's walked into powerlifting. So it's also just about recognizing that though you are still incredibly strong, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're more advanced than what you think you are. You know what I mean? So you can still definitely push that spectrum a little bit harder than what other people, or what.
Yeah, for sure. Like it's more about your training history, for sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think also, that's kind of a little bit of a good sort of point to make, is that some people are going to be able to recomp easier just because they're genetically like kind of programmed for it. I mean, I've had lots of stories from people. I know tons of people who work in like strength and conditioning for like rugby and American football, for example. And they're like, dude, there's some of these dudes, like we can't let them lift because they get too big to actually play their sport, which is a nice problem to have. But like some people can just recomp real easy. And some people, it might be a bit tougher just because genetically some of us gain muscle a bit easier and some of us don't, right?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think, like, on that note, like, I wanted to kind of get into some of the macronutrient splits and stuff that we like to encourage people to have when they're going through this recomping phase. So we've kind of touched on like a few of the different categories and stuff. Like, is there a point where, like, a newbie lifter or someone that's got a high body fat percentage or something like that, will you prioritize certain macronutrients over others? Like, I would imagine keeping protein higher is probably something that's pretty important as well.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, a lot of it is about just kind of trying to optimize a bit. So there's a lot of nutrition advice that I give for the average person where it's like, if you're eating 1.6 grams of protein per kilo, like you're probably fine in most cases. But if you're trying to recomp, I would put that higher just to be on the safe side. So I'd start to go closer to like 2, maybe even a little bit more, depending how advanced you are, how lean you are. If you're pretty lean, you probably need a bit more to maintain your muscle mass and just kind of offset that sort of brain going, oh, body fat stores are a bit low. Like maybe we need to bring the lean mass down a bit so we survive, kind of thing. So certainly like protein is a thing you want to focus on because that's going to promote muscle mass no matter what, right? So I would say like probably bottom end, I typically would go 1.8 grams per kilo of body weight, but I'd probably even go a little bit higher if you're a bit leaner or something like that. And then from there, the fat and the carbs for me can kind of land where they want to land. I think more about what makes someone feel good from a health perspective, because I think if you're maximizing health, I think you give yourself the best possible chance to then put on muscle and recover well, and then it actually works into your recomp better. And what I mean by that is the types of foods we choose. As an example, like I can give someone a specific carb number, but I would prefer that we kind of going and looking at, are they getting a good variety of foods that happen to be kind of carbohydrate heavy foods? Because then we're maximizing fiber, we're maximizing micronutrients, phytonutrients, all these kind of extra plays that people don't talk about that much when they're talking about macros. They're thinking more just about the energy and like, how do I feel training and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But making those things a bigger part of your mindset means that you are maximizing all of those little areas that can contribute to supporting your overall health and recovery and building muscle. And then the same thing with the fat. I think that's going to vary a little bit. I've found lately, I used to recommend like relatively low fat because I kind of felt a lot of people can get away with it. However, I actually have found more recently that going a little bit higher with fat seems to be a bit better in the sort of medium to long term for a lot of my clients.
Yeah.
And I don't mean super high fat, but like I used to kind of go, oh, don't go below, 0.6 or 0.5 grams of fat per kilo. And now I'm probably closer to like 1-ish.
Yeah.
Maybe even a bit more. I find especially some of my female clients actually feel a bit better in the longer term on a bit more. Yeah, like 70, 80 grams kind of thing, as opposed to just going by body weight.
Yeah.
So that's where I kind of land with it. And then I still am looking at, what kinds of fats are we having? Are we having mostly saturated or unsaturated fats, this kind of stuff? If you have a higher proportion of saturated fats, like it's not like unhealthy necessarily, but if you have more of a ratio of unsaturated fat, you tend to get better outcomes in terms of like managing inflammation and cardiovascular health and that kind of stuff. And again, that's going to contribute to the recovery. It's a little 1%er.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, my approach really with the macro split and that kind of stuff is really just let's make sure that we're more than covering our sort of minimum of protein just as a safe side. And then from there, making sure that we're probably getting a good balance between the carbs and the fats, but more making sure that the sources of all of that stuff is good and is varied as well.
Yeah, definitely. I know like Will's been a really big pusher at the moment of just people like just really simple food swaps that you can make in your diet that you don't even notice, like using more extra virgin olive oil when you're cooking and stuff like that. Like such simple little things like bringing, instead of using a popcorn or whatever is like your snack, maybe just use some almonds or something like that. Like just very simple little food swaps that, I mean, obviously popcorn and almonds calorically very, very differently. But just an example of like, if you're looking for just a snacky alternative, like find something that is ticking those health boxes without you necessarily having to drive more attention and like think too much about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
100%. And I actually on that, I think like I've worked with some powerlifters before who were like pretty big units, and so their caloric requirements are high.
Yeah.
And so in those situations, you tend to just default to like, well, I'm going to put a bit of ice cream in my shake because it like tastes good and I need freaking calories, you know? So,
yeah, definitely.
But like, I think that starts to sort of add up. And then when you're trying to actually recomp, it's like all of those little things that are maybe not the healthiest in the world, but allow you to hit your calories a bit easier are probably doing you more harm than good. And I'd almost like prefer to see, if the calories were a bit lower even, but you're eating healthier foods, you'd probably get more muscle mass out of it because Like you're managing inflammation better, you're recovering better, you feel better, more energetic, so you train harder,
Absolutely.
etc.
Yeah, like Will literally just pour extra virgin olive oil over the top of a meal. He's like, I've cooked all this up, I'm good to go, I'm just going to pour it. Like I know one of your clients, Dan, is the same. He's got to eat a buttload of food.
Yeah, which Dan are you talking
Dan
about?
Breen.
Yes, Dan. I'm sorry, I've got more than one Dan. I'm like, he's got a lot, but he's great. Yeah, nuts, seeds. Like he's very much so into like whole foods first. To the point where I'm like, are you okay? Like, do we need to make things smaller
Is our
for you?
fiber
like,
a little bit too?
I was like, are you actually okay with this?
Yeah.
Definitely. I think on that note, like we talked about the different spectrums and stuff. So if you are someone that is carrying a little bit more body fat percentage, obviously you could probably get away whilst recomping being in a little bit more of a deficit because obviously you've got a lot more stored energy and stuff. Do you have like certain percentage ranges that you like to sort of play within when you're using some of these for like newer people, those intermediates, and then the more advanced athletes?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's a good point. Like, I probably should have mentioned that, like, when you're recomping, generally you're kind of around maintenance, but you can kind of go slight surplus, slight deficit, depending, and still more or less maintain your body composition, but sort of emphasize more fat loss or more muscle gain in that sense. So certainly with people who have more body fat or are more of a beginner, you can actually go into a slight deficit, and it might be something like, I don't know, like 10% or something like that. Yeah. The thing is with, obviously with calories, I should mention it, like, but if you say I'm eating 2,000 calories, it's never exactly 2,000 calories every day. It's more of a range, right? I think probably most people kind of understand that, like, your energy output varies day by day. Like each portion of food is not exactly the calories and the macros in it that your app says it is. It's all a little bit different. So, so sometimes people go, oh, well, you know, like it's a 5% deficit. And I'm like, well, that's probably within the margin of error. So it can be a bit hard to say like I'm in a 50 calorie deficit or whatever. But yeah, probably about 10%, I'd say deficit would work quite well for those people. I mean, like if you're actually like very overweight or like a near beginner, I mean, I think you can even gain muscle in like a 20-30% deficit. Yeah. You know, like you can be losing significant amount of fat and still gain muscle, or at least maintain it at the same time. So that's where I would go with that. But I mean, you can also sort of go, look, I want to recomp, but I want to emphasize maybe the muscle gain a little bit more than sort of fat loss. And so in that case, I think you can actually go with a slight surplus. Now, this will vary a little bit. And the interesting thing about this is because when you add a surplus of calories, what's happening is your energy cost goes up a little bit as well, your energy output, partly because you got more food that you're eating now that you have to metabolize. So there's increased digestion cost. Partly you might be training a bit harder because you've got a bit more energy around. And so you have to kind of factor that in slightly. Those are pretty minor though. But the main thing is that when you overfeed people, they tend to have metabolic adaptation. So some people might have heard of metabolic adaptation in the context of losing weight. And what happens is when you lose weight, your metabolism actually starts to slow down just a little bit. When you overfeed, your metabolism can speed up a little bit, but it varies much, much more than in a fat loss situation. So in some studies, they will overfeed people, and some people won't have any increase in their energy output whatsoever, and some people will have an enormous increase in their energy output. And I've experienced this myself. I had one client where, I mean, he was very physically active. He was a firefighter, but you know, he would maintain his weight on 2,500 calories. And we're like, okay, let's do a bulk. So I like give him an extra 500 calories, which is pretty big. Yeah. And kind of nothing happened. I was like, okay, shit, are you actually eating this? And you give him another 500 and it's like barely moving the scale. I'm like, what is going on? And he ends up having to eat like 4,000 calories just to put on weight, this dude. Which is an extreme example, but it could be that sometimes you give people a 5 or 10% surplus and kind of most of it disappears.
I have
because
clients
they're just
like that too.
Expending more energy.
Yeah. And you're like, are you
so that one's going to be a bit
actually?
variable. Yeah, it's crazy. So
But it's not
if
just
you're
like
someone who finds it's hard to put on weight, that's probably what's happening.
Yeah, definitely. But it's not just that it's like their metabolism that's changed as well, right? You know, you could look at like energy expenditure and all that sort of stuff as well. Like they just become like, you know, more, there's a lot more movement and stuff like that as well. So
yeah. It's a lot of subconscious movement where most of that comes from.
Yeah,
for sure.
definitely.
So you won't even notice it, but it's just like you're burning more energy.
Yeah, definitely. Your training intensity, all that sort of stuff improves massively.
All of that just
so
adds up.
all those things that are normal energy expenditures just increase a little bit more because you've just got more energy that you want to train harder or move more or whatever.
Yeah.
And then obviously there's those other sort of factors that come into it as well, which are, really big influences to it. So,
Yep.
yeah, definitely. Like, I think it's just really important here, and like kind of the key thing that we're really wanting a lot of people to take away from this is the fact that eating in a maintenance of calories does not mean that you're just you're in a stagnant position. Like, there's so many things that we can start to do and improve and implement. Like, do you want to go off a few of the things that you like to encourage some of your guys to do when they're in a maintenance of calories? Like, certain metrics and markers that you encourage them to look at and improve and change.
Like the 1%ers. So
Yeah,
talking about like.
Let's be real, the fitness industry is flooded with coaching programs, all using the same buzzwords: comprehensive, tailored, individualized, super confusing. What does that actually mean for you? At Nexus Performance, we cut through the shit. We take the time to actually understand your struggles, what drives you, what's holding you back, and then we coach you through it. With our online strength coaching, you're not getting a templated program. Your training program is built around you. You're also going to be getting one-on-one consult calls, Loom video feedback, direct messaging for coaching cues and questions, so you know exactly what to do and how to do it. If that sounds like the support that you've been looking for, let's make it happen. Visit our website today for weekly or monthly programming support.
I guess we haven't touched on like meal timing or like supplements, sleep. So like, are there any kind of specific things that you like to hone in on when you've got a client, say, who is intermediate, who is training really hard and who wants to maximize their muscle gain while in like a maintenance-ish phase?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, my normal approach is to be pretty flexible with most people and just kind of like, look, if you're good 80% of the time and you're nailing stuff, then it's probably fine. But I think when you're trying to recomp and that's like a big goal of yours, then you kind of do need to just be much more consistent with all of that low-hanging fruit that we always talk about. Getting enough sleep. Like I'd probably like 7 to 9 hours is kind of the general recommendation, but like basically the more the better, more or less. And being consistent with your sleep and wake times, so not kind of on the weekends making it too different, because you start to get a sort of micro jet lag effect that way, which is not good. I think the meal timing as well, being consistent with it is good, because that guarantees a sort of that your intake's going to be pretty good. It's not going to mess with your appetite or anything like that. So I think all of those little things and just trying to be like relatively consistent with macro intake, fiber intake, micronutrient intake. From a supplemental point of view, I'd probably be looking at some of those sort of basic, well-studied supplements, like getting a little bit of fish oil if you don't eat fish, getting some creatine in.
Good quality.
I would maybe even. I used to be a little bit against like multis, but I'm back on the multi train. I actually take one myself a little bit now as well. So I think it just covers a few bases. So I wouldn't go over the top with supplementation, but I think those basic things, just like getting them in, is good coverage. It is 1% stuff, which is why I often don't recommend supplements. But in this case, we're looking for 1% stuff. So that's fine.
Because we've got the client base that want to apply those 1%ers as well, right? Like, what are the sacrifices?
I mean, it's easy, right? I mean, taking a scoop of creatine and a multi every day is like such low effort, and you could be yielding good.
Although I don't know now if it's going to like, make it not as effective if it's in boiling water. But I don't know if there's many studies out there that say otherwise.
I think the boiling water is okay, but I think there was some stuff about caffeine affecting the absorption of it. So I don't know. But I mean, I'm not too fussed with that. I just kind of take a little bit of extra and it's fine.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's what I do. Because I'm like,
the old like extra half a scoop of everything.
So I'm like, just for good luck. Oops.
Something's better than nothing.
That's what I say. I'm like, if I don't put it in my coffee, I probably won't have it. So then I'm like, well, I may as well just put it in my coffee. Like,
yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm all about that. Absolutely.
And what are some of the things?
I mean, the other thing I think that's a little underrated is actually just stress management.
Yes.
So, like, that's probably where a lot of people go, yeah, I really should be doing that, but I kind of, whatever. Like, I'm sleeping well and I'm eating well and I'm training hard. But the stress management's a really big part of things. It really improves recovery, and there's studies directly showing that people that are more stressed gain less muscle when they do the exact same training and eat the exact same as other people. So it's really important to get a handle on that. And I think that's a little bit individual as to how you manage it, but I think you should be proactive about managing stress, which might be something like scheduling in time for your hobbies, or literally, like I have some clients where I literally tell them, like, I know you use a calendar for everything. In your calendar, lie on the couch and don't do anything else, like that's your time to do that and not think about anything. And if it's in the calendar, then they go, oh, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
Literally.
Stress about
I had that conversation with a few clients last week alone where I'm like, what are your non-negotiables? Like, what are 3 things that you want to make sure that you tick every day? Let's make them really simple and achievable. And then let's set like some weekly non-negotiables. And so they're all like, I want to train 4 times a week. I want to meal prep on Sundays. I want to do this. And I'm like, okay, cool. Now, what are you doing for your mental health? Like, where is the time where you can spend an hour or 2 with your partner, or take the dog for a walk, or do the little things that literally just give you joy in your life that you can, and if you put that in as a non-negotiable, then like a lot of people are like, oh, I feel really guilty taking time off because, like I could be putting that towards something more productive or whatever. And I mean, I was really guilty of that myself, where I take an afternoon off work and I'm like, oh, fuck, like, that 4 or 5 hours would have been really helpful to plan this thing out or whatever.
For sure.
But then the next day I'm like, holy shit, I'm so much more productive, and I'm able to really apply myself in each window of time that I'm doing things towards, because I've been able to have that moment of decompress. And like you said, by literally putting it in there as a non-negotiable, well, then you don't feel so guilty about doing it because you understand why that's so helpful in the big picture of stress management at the end of the day. Like, people feel a lot less burnt out when they're doing fun things in their life alongside productive things in their life as well. Yep. So
I'm a strong believer that there should be some stuff in your schedule that is there just for the sake of doing it. You don't have to be good at it. It doesn't have to be getting you anywhere. But the funny thing is, it kind of is getting you somewhere, because as you say, it makes you more productive. It actually de-stresses you, so you recover better, so you gain more muscle. Like definitely. Sort of sneakily making you a bit more productive.
Yeah, you're getting gains.
It can just be in there for the sake of it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think that's actually really huge. So like that would be a big underrated one that I think people should take care of. And while I'm on it, I also want to kind of say that sometimes hobbies and downtime involves stuff like, listening to podcasts and like reading books or watching TV shows or playing games or whatever it is. And that's all really good stuff. But I would also really recommend something that I call like decompression time, which is literally not doing anything, not having media blasting away your brain. Stimulation. Yeah. Just drop the stimulation for a little bit. Because if you've ever had that situation where you finally have some quiet time, you're lying in bed, or like maybe you're doing the dishes or something, and your mind is just going and like going over all of the stuff that you got to do or whatever, constantly, ruminating on a situation.
Yeah.
That's because your brain hasn't had the space to just go over and process it yet. And so if you specifically make that time, it makes a really big difference. And I don't think it has to be a lot of time, but certainly like if you go for a walk and you got sort of 15 or 20 minutes, like just don't chuck the music or the podcast in for that walk. Don't look at your phone on social media, and just let yourself think. And that actually makes a huge difference. So I'd also recommend coupling that with your
definitely.
Other
I need to do that more.
There's 2 things that I do that are literally like little, remnants of that. So when I take Bowser for a walk in the morning, there's no music, no phone. Like this morning I went by myself with Bowser because Tuesdays and Thursdays was at the gym earlier. And I just walk around. I walk around the park. I interact with people, like the elderly people that are walking their little Shih Tzus and stuff like that. Like I make a very conscious effort to not have any electronics with me, and to a point where what I do on my phone is I actually have like an app blocker or an app limiter where I can't access some of those things. I mean, I can if I absolutely have to, but like I'm not able to access them so easily until a certain point in the time. So I think it's like 7:30 a.m. or something like that certain apps actually start to become available for me to use, because like I'll very easily just pull my phone out, listen to a thing, or send some messages off and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, this is a peaceful walk for me, but really, like, I want to be out. I want to immerse myself into where I'm at. And then the second one is gardening. Like, I love doing things with my hands, and just like, it's almost like an instant gratification of like, I've pulled out some weeds and now my garden looks better and stuff like that. But it allows me to get out of my head and do things with my hands and stuff. So you mentioned like doing the dishes or cleaning the house or whatever people's little like things are. I actually encourage a lot of my athletes or my clients to write out a list of like little hobbies that they have, whether it's playing guitar, listening to like playing an instrument. I know you're a little bit of an instrumental head. I've seen videos of you
pull out
like
the flute every now and then, look up Lord of the Rings music and play some, and then get bored of it 5 minutes later.
Yeah, and Jared's just like in the other room, headphone like earplugs
Like,
like, make it stop. Or dancing on the kitchen bench top.
Oh yeah, that's if I'm feeling fancy.
She's a menace. It's just little things that allow you to get out of your head into your body and just like you said, process stuff without even realizing sometimes that you're kind of doing that as well. Is that what you're referring to?
100%. Yeah, I love that. I think that like gardening and stuff like that. For me, it's cooking. Like I cook every day, and I try to make like not fancy meals, but like they take a bit of effort and they take a bit of time to do each step. So it's a good hour and a half or 2 hours of like prepping a nice meal or something for dinner. And that's my time where I don't have anything else going on, and you're just focused on like, cutting stuff up.
Like textures, the smells,
exactly. Yeah. You're very like focused on your hands and the sensory experience, which is cool.
Yeah. And obviously with the family and stuff, it's nice for you guys to then be able to sit down and enjoy that as well. Like,
super rewarding. Yeah.
Young dad and stuff. So, having that time for you guys to be able to connect as a family obviously is really, really important too. So it all comes together.
Because I got a 3-year-old and like she gets to watch me do that. So like you're modeling it, which is important. So I think that's pretty big. And I mean, also just to kind of keep going on the social media phone use train, there is actually some interesting research looking at mental fatigue and how that affects your training. So if you spend a lot of time on your phone, it seems to induce mental fatigue, and that actually reduces the amount of volume that people do in a subsequent workout. So I think there's also, if we're talking 1%ers, like for most people, maybe it doesn't make a huge difference, but if you're trying to really maximize a recomping situation, you're trying to maximize your training, then I think spending less time on your phone, especially just prior to training and during your session, is going to add just a little extra. And then I think it has the added benefit, especially these days, of just reducing the overall stress level. So that's a big one, I reckon.
Yeah, definitely. I don't have any notifications on any of my stuff. I know you have Instagram notifications on. Do you?
I don't look at Instagram though when I train because it's so early. Like
I don't have any
like
Instagram
just to have my spreadsheet on my phone. And because I'm on a tight timeline, I like it. I time like the rest, so I'm just like efficient with it, and it's like
too.
Like this is me time. Like I don't want anyone talking to me. Like I'm here to train.
I don't even realize it now, but just looking at our phones, I know you've got your phone open for notes and stuff like that, but I always intentionally have my phone screen down. So I don't ever, not that I really have any notifications on, but my phone is always screened down. I used to have an Apple Watch and stuff, but all the notifications that will come up on that, or the messages, like all those little things.
That'll stress me out.
I really just try to eliminate.
That's my high-tech Casio.
I was expecting you to rock the Rolex, man.
That's way more hip. No. That's like,
that's a cool dad vibes.
Makes your arm looks bigger. It's great.
Definitely. I think all those little things, like, again, you can kind of go a little bit too woo-woo with it, and people are like, oh, okay, you're just trying to remove electronics from your life or whatever. And I'm like, well, no, I'm just trying to remove stimulation from my life. Like, I've got enough of that going on as it is. So literally sitting at the door, Bowser's just going off his head at the moment. So, it's one of those things where I'm like, I don't need anything more to put you in that heightened state. You want to try and eliminate some of that stuff to bring you down. And as you said, obviously going back to the whole recomping, it all comes in full picture, right? Like the less stressed you are, the more you can apply yourself to these other 1%ers that we're asking people to do, because that's probably the biggest reason why people don't follow through with these protocols or consistency and stuff, is because they're just always so overwhelmed and so stressed, and I don't have time for it anymore, and those sort of like really common
The
excuses.
snowball, then it's like sleep's impacted, and then
Yeah.
training's impacted, and then their nutrition choices falter, and it's just like,
Definitely.
100%.
I think I'm going through this now. If there's anything more specifically that we've got here, I think the last couple of questions, just like, was there anything we can do to preserve muscle and strength during those deficits as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing is just like covering all of those key things very consistently. So like, adequate protein is going to be super important. Training hard, super important. Getting enough sleep, super important. Managing stress. I think those are kind of like the big buckets that I think about.
Yeah, definitely.
The other thing I think we probably can talk a little bit about is like just not just the sort of like how big is your deficit, how big is your surplus, and this kind of thing, but just how long you're trying to do those things for.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I think that's kind of the dimension that a lot of people don't even really think about. But if you're trying to do a little bit of a recomp and it's you're in a slight deficit and it's going on for quite a long time, it's like the chances of you sort of gaining muscle in that situation is sort of diminishing the longer it goes along.
Yeah,
there's not really a specific timeline I have there, but
the less hopefully you're losing
difference.
fat over that time as well, so that stored amount is reducing as well.
Right. Exactly right. But it's the same with other tactics that you might use, like another sort of alternative to the recomping is to just kind of go through those bulking and cutting phases, and you can do them in sort of shorter term periods. So you could do like mini cut sort of style, where it's like, okay, I've spent 8 to 12 weeks trying to gain a bit of muscle, and now I'm just going to cut the fat back a bit by doing a relatively aggressive diet, but it's only going to be for a short period of time.
I encourage it for athletes, like priming the body essentially for the next gaining phase. Yeah,
for sure. And I think it can be, because it's like, I think the biggest challenge with recomping is just that, like we mentioned before, it takes time, and so you have to be able to focus for that amount of time on doing it. Whereas I think for some people and their personalities and whatever, it's just like I need a 2 to 3 month sort of focus, and that might be, okay, we're going to bulk more specifically for 2 to 3 months, and then we're going to have a month mini cut, and that kind of just breaking it up like that ends up being a better way for them to handle recomping over the longer term. So that could be a way of doing it as well. But again, it's kind of about the amount of time. If you're trying to minimize the amount of muscle that you lose during a diet, then you not only have to think about the size of the deficit, but you also think about the timeline. If I go on a 40 or 50% deficit for 2 weeks, I'm unlikely to lose any muscle, even though it's an extreme deficit. Similarly, if I do a 20% pretty modest deficit, but I'm doing it for 6 months, okay, your risk of muscle loss is there because it's a longer period of time. So those are all things that you sort of need to think about as well.
Yeah, definitely. Is there any, like, I know you've been through the whole chapter of trying to change metabolism and working through all that sort of stuff as well.
I personally found it, like, I think for me, because we had a really set timeline, going from the bulk, we went straight into like a diet. And I think there was a lot of like pressure to kind of be a certain weight by a certain time because of competition. So for me, I found that a bit of like a quite drastic going from one to the other. I think I prefer like that more slow, kind of drawn out, longer process. I like the process of it all. Like I'm happy just kind of chipping away slowly. So yeah, I found that personally. I was like, that's a lot to kind of get my head around, being one day it's like excess and then the next day it's like prolonged deficit. So
yeah, it's like a really big
merry-go-round.
Like total change is big as opposed to maybe slowly tapering down and whatever.
Yeah. And I mean, there's so many different ways you can do it, right? Like you just mentioned, like, do you take people maybe like, like a slower kind of way between them, or do you kind of go set?
Yeah, it kind of depends. But like some of the people that I coach, they're not like, they do powerlifting and stuff, but they're not like super competitive or anything. They're kind of just like, it's a fun thing to do. It
power
gives me
building
direction in my training.
Yeah,
power building, really. Yeah, exactly. And in that case, we might go, look, eventually I want to move up a weight class or something like that, but I'm happy if that happens in the next 2 years or something. It's like, okay, cool. Well, then we can just slowly move our way through this. Whereas other people are like, yeah, maybe I'm at the edge of my my weight class, or I want to jump up to another one, or I want to go down another one. You got to be a little bit more extreme in the shorter term because they want to be competitive and this kind of thing. So it kind of depends, but generally speaking, I do prefer if I can sort of make those changes a bit slowly, because as you say, if you're going from like, well, I'm in a surplus, 1 week, and then I'm going to go into a deficit, like the swing between the two makes the change really big, and it can be quite difficult to adjust to for some people. Some people like it.
Yeah, Will
Some people think
does.
it's fine.
No, I
He's a
find
bit
it-
more of
Yeah,
an
I mean, sometimes
extremist.
it's like a mindset thing. It's just like,
Yeah.
well, I'm doing this and it's on and I'm locked in, and some people really respond well to that.
Yeah.
But other people, it's like, yeah, we'll bring it slowly down to maintenance. We'll do like maintenance, but we're still focused on doing everything properly for a month, and then we'll switch to a deficit. And so it's a little bit more of a slow change, but we're just more focusing on the sort of routines and the habits that they're in.
Yeah. It's
And
more
that can
sustainable.
work really well. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what it's about. It's like teaching these people, like, because hopefully they don't need a coach for the rest of their life, and they can kind of work,
Exactly.
and understand all the different phases and how you can go more aggressive in a surplus and in a deficit, and then how you can maintain all of that sort of stuff after you've done all the hard work. And it's just, yeah, like you said, like maybe taking a couple, like all those different approaches over time anyway, so that they learn then how to do it themselves and what they want to do at certain times of their
Exactly.
life in the future. I know Will's always just been the sort of person that he's like, no, when I'm dieting, like, let's go. And when I'm
Yeah.
gaining, let's go. And I don't want to sit in the middle, because the middle is boring for me. But I mean, like, he's been doing that the last year or so anyways with the fertility stuff. Like, he's working with Ben Cant.
Mhm.
On all of his fertility stuff, and a lot of that's just been like, let's just get your health in a, you just need to get into a really healthy position for your body to do
And you
the
just got to
thing.
sit there for a while.
Yeah, and you just got to live in that world, unfortunately. And like, obviously Will's, he's type 1 diabetic now as well, so there's a lot of different things that he's had to learn with the autoimmune diseases and all that sort of stuff as well, that his body is responding to, and how different that is versus the Will that was 5 or 6 years ago at the pinnacle of his performance. So it's just learning to live in all those different spaces, and then hopefully getting back into the more aggressive stages in the coming year and months and stuff like that. So yeah, I think we've covered off a lot of this sort of different stuff, like the pros and cons of taking the slower approach versus the more aggressive approach, and all those different phases and stuff. Is there anything else that you wanted to kind of cover off there, Jordan?
No, it's literally, this is my bedtime.
Yeah.
Just so you know. So if you saw me slowly fading, like, I'm like, where's my magnesium? Like, it's magnesium time.
reaching for that. But no, I mean, I think I've taken a lot out of this chat anyways, and
It's been good. I've enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
She was just like, I just want to sit here.
Yeah,
and
I
listen.
was like, I'm just listening, like
enjoying it. But no, I think for a lot of the athletes and stuff out there, like I said, we've kind of come at this from a few different angles, from people that are newer beginners and that sort of stuff, to people that are obviously a little bit more advanced, and the important things. Like, it sounds so simple because we've kind of just gone back to the grassroots stuff, right? Like, eat well, sleep well, all that sort of stuff,
For sure.
and then good things happen. And it's just sometimes a matter of just being patient with the process, as boring as that may sound sometimes as well. It's just like the metrics, actually, that was one thing I wanted to say, was like the metrics that you can look at over time. And that's where it can be really helpful to get things like photos and measurements and stuff, because using body weight scales as your only data point is not necessarily indicative of the results that you've accomplished over that time. Is there anything else that you like to look at? Like, do you look too much into DEXA scans or any of that?
They're fine, but they've got quite a big margin of error for an individual. So you kind of need more than a couple of scans to really understand. You got to see a trend. But it's probably a good thing to have covered off, because sometimes recomping is pretty slow, and it's like, how do I know if it's working or not? As you say, I like to take at least one thing that's like a bit more subjective and one thing that's a bit more objective. So you might subjectively kind of go, how are my clothes fitting?
Yep.
How do I look in the mirror? And then something that's a bit more objective would be like your body weight or girth measurements or whatever. But definitely at least combine two of those different kinds, and I think you're good. Scans are fine, but I think you got to use them the same way that you use weighing, in that you got to have a few data points to really see what's happening with them.
Yeah.
I think belt buckle your powerlifting belt. That's the metric.
That helps. That definitely helps.
Where your belt buckle is. I'm like, yep.
How often would you say getting a DEXA scan then to get that consistent sort of data trend? Like, is once a year often enough, or are you looking every 3 months and all that sort of thing?
I would say the most often I would get them is every few months, because the if you look at for an individual, the margin of error is actually 3% either side. So it's a 6% margin of error. So if it measures you at 15%, you could be 12% or you could be 18% or anything in between, which is quite big if you think about it for like the gold standard, whatever that people call it. So I think at most every 3 months, because then you got more of a potential change to be able to measure it. You know what I mean? You're less likely to just be within that margin of error. But I would say for most of my people, they probably get them like maybe twice a year, something like that.
Yeah.
And, you know, and then in between, we've got girth measurements and we've got scales. And so if we're like, oh, all of this stuff is trending in the same direction, cool, then we know.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I don't really encourage my athletes to get them any more than, like, because some people can get overly fixated on data and numbers and metrics and stuff. So Will's, like, again, like just using him as an example here, but every single time that he's gone and gotten a DEXA scan, he's like, I'm always trying to, obviously, you know, it's open information there that Will uses PEDs and stuff like that. So he's like, I'm always trying to replicate the scenario of when I'm getting these results. So he's like, I'm going in a fasted state. I'm going in first thing in the morning. I'm going in at this time of my prep, knowing that these are the sorts of compounds that I'm using, that I may be carrying these inflammatory markers and all that sort of stuff. So he's like, I'm not doing that at a pinnacle of a powerlifting prep. And then 3 months later, when I'm going through a completely different phase and my protocols and everything like that is I'm a completely different beast at that time. And obviously supplements, PEDs is going to be a really big driver for like muscle mass, and what those scales are showing. So like one day he could be 105 kilos of lean mass, and then the next one he's 98 and he's like, I've lost 7 kilos of muscle. And it's like, well,
exactly.
No, you haven't. It's just how all of those different things are measured based on, like, you know, like you said, that the margin of error, but also just the whole environmental situation that he's in those two different states. So obviously that's an athlete and that's a very unique circumstance versus someone that's a little bit more general population. But I still always encourage my guys, if they're going in to get DEXA scans or even those bioscan things that you see people throwing around with in the gym floor now, I'm like, don't use that 5 o'clock in the afternoon and then go back and do it in a fasted state at 7 a.m.
Exactly.
3 or 4 weeks later. Like, it's going to look completely different. So just replicate the scenario whenever you're going in and try and use that as another thing to consider when you're getting those results. So,
100% agree. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Is there anything else that you wanted to add on the recomping note? I feel like we've covered off a lot of different things.
I don't think.
Cool. Good.
I think we covered it. Yeah.
Yeah, polished it off very nicely. All right. Well, thank you again for your time. I know you've got a day ahead of you now, whereas Jordan's ready to hit.
I'm going to be like
it's bedtime.
Blasting music on the drive home.
Snooze. Cool. All right. Well, like I said, thank you again for your time. I really appreciate it. Obviously, we'll be sending this out to a lot of our listeners and stuff to answer their questions. And obviously, if people want to find you on social media, it's at Luke Tulloch, I believe.
Yep.
Is your Instagram? We'll put it all in the show notes and stuff like this as well.
Easy.
But Tulloch is spelt Tulloch. Is that right?
You got it.
Yeah,
perfect.
I nailed it. I know, because you messed it up. She's just like, it was T-O. And I was like,
man, you should see me try to spell my name to Swedes, dude. It's that's
where is it from? Where is Tulloch actually from? Is it?
It's Scottish.
Oh, okay, there you go. See, the Crozier is Irish, and I only found that out a few months ago. So
I didn't even know
that.
that.
Right? Oh, cool.
Yeah, there you go. That's where his history's from.
Well, Stefano's Italian, if you didn't know, but
we're all multicultural here. Lovely. All right. Well, thank you again for your time. Like I said, we'll put all the email and contact details and stuff if anyone wants to reach out to you. I know you've done a lot of different courses. Do you still do your courses and stuff?
Yeah.
You still do?
Yeah, I'm kicking it back up again, so I'm refreshing a bunch of stuff. I've got a programming thing that I'm working on for this, like my main project for this year. So
Cool.
yeah, that'll be on its way.
Yeah, awesome. We'll be definitely
Keep an eye out.
sending a lot of people out that way because, like I said, I learn a lot from you just in the bits and pieces that I see through socials or podcasts or whatever, and would definitely be recommending a lot of people to do the same thing. So thank
I
you for your
appreciate it.
time, and yeah, have a lovely day, and we'll be
Thank
off
you.
on our way.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thanks for making the time again. Appreciate
All
it.
good.
All good. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right.
Cool.